Hi everyone. So welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk about um, regression and what does regression mean and what are the different types of regression, what are the different like information that we need to know or different terminologies that we need to know in regression analysis. So broadly, regression is a measure of like formal definition of regression is a measure of relation or relationship between mean values of one variable to the mean values of another variable. So what is regression? Regression is a measure of relationship between mean or average values of one variable to the corresponding average values, changes in the corresponding average values of another variable. The way we explain a regression is say, for example, what can be a good example of regression? So regression is a predictive models. So that means you try to predict. Say, if I change, but the core example that comes about regression analysis is the theory of demand and theory of price. So theory of demand, theory of price is related with quantity demand and quantity supply. If price goes up, quantity goes down. If price goes up, supply goes up. Now, how do we say these statements, right? Price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. So it is based on some statistical results. Their statistical method is called regression. So uh, some scholars, some economists, they collected a product's pricing information and some quantity information in two different columns, and they run a simple linear regression in Excel or using some other programming. And they found that when price goes up, demand goes down, they have an inverse relationship. So if you scatter plot them, the price on the horizontal axis, demand on the vertical axis, the price goes up, demand goes down. So there is an inverse relationship. So this is the definitional aspect of regression. Now, in a regression, there are a lot of terminologies that we need to know. A regression has a dependent variable and an independent variable. Or in simple linear regression, we have one dependent variable and one independent variable. In multiple linear regression, we have one dependent variable, but on the right-hand side of the equation, we might have multiple independent variables, right? So how do we explain the coefficients then? In a regression, we explain the coefficient in a very simple way. We say if price goes up with the same price and demand example, if price goes up by 1 unit, then quantity demanded goes down by the coefficient amount. Now, when I say coefficient, coefficient is one terminology in regression. So when you're trying to measure the relationship between price and quantity, and if you run a simple integration, you will get a coefficient value for price. So that means if price goes up by 1 unit, demand goes down by that coefficient amount. So that is the very basic like uh, explanation of regression coefficients. So I said about two things. One is dependent variable, the other is independent variable. Dependent variable is a variable which is or affected by the changes in the independent. So the independent variable is the cause, dependent variable is the event, right? Independent variable is the cause, dependent variable is the effect. Cause, and that's why regression analysis is called an cause and effect relationship. Now, some experimental designer they argue that regression is not an cause and effect relationship, but in general, the idea of multiple linear regression is a cause and effect relationship. So in cause and effect relationship, what you try to do, you say that price, the effect that you get with the coefficient is the only effect of price changes on quantity demanded. If you can ensure that, uh, what does that mean? If you would like to ensure it, you have to control the effects of all other variables on quantity demanded. So in a regression, when you involve more and more independent variable on the right-hand side, maybe price, quantity demand can goes up and down for many other variables other than price too, right, in real world. And that is the reality. So price can go up and down because of a natural disaster. During COVID-19, everything price went up even because of the supply shortages, right? So price was Like quantity demanded went so high for some stationery and sanitary items like towels or towel paper or toilet tissues. So that was not the only reason of price. It was also supply related quantity, supply in general, supply of those products that also affected the quantity demanded. So that's how we need to understand like these basic terminologies. The coefficient is very important. There are dependent and independent variables. Those are some basic things that we need to understand in a regression. Now, what are the different types of regression? Um, Regression can be multiple types. So regression is a prediction model. In this prediction model is an statistical model that we try to fit with the data. So it's basically the distribution of the data determines what type of regression model we need. So if you are dealing with a normal distribution of your dependent variables, you can use simple and multiple linear regression. Those are two types of regressional methods. We call the method name for simple and multiple linear regression is actually OLS, ordinary least square method. Now, there is another type of regression some of your independent variable are categorical variable in nature, not continuous or numeric variable. Then you need to use categorical variable regression. Actually, the interpretation is different category because you have to explain the coefficients in terms of the base of the categories, because there will be one category for the categorical variable that will be captured by the intercept term. That is another term in regression, which is when all your independent variables take the values of zero, right? So those of you who know about regression should be familiar with the term intercept. So in categorical regression, the coefficient interpretation is related to the base dummy. Then if you have a like dependent variable which is probability distribution binary in nature, then you have to use logistic or probability regression. And if there are some more complex regressional model like panel data regression, if you have data for individual observations for several years for the same observations, and then you should use panel data regression analysis. If you would like to figure out the uh, spurious effect of independent variable on regression, dependent variables, because independent variables, if your dependent variables is related with the error term, right, then you might get some regression coefficients which are spurious in nature. In order to get rid of it, you have to use some proxy of your independent variables, which are less biased, not correlated with the error term. And that is called 2S stage least square method or 2SLS method. So broadly, regression is a predictive model. It tries to determine the effect, cause and effect relationship between two variables. Especially the idea of multiple regression is the cause and effect relationship. But basically we call it a predictive model because it tries to predict the relationship between one variable and another. So that means if I invest $10,000 in advertising in social media, I would like to see how much revenue will increase in the following month, right? So that's how we are saying it, a prediction, right? In regression, when you estimate the regression equation, if you put different values of an independent variable, you will see the predictive value of the dependent variable, right? So I hope it helps, and I will see you in next video.